Hey guys, my name is Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net,
And I'm Nathan from jazzguitarlessons.net.
and welcome to this masterclass number 1 on learning the language of music. So in the next hour, we will have sort of a discussion, and as you know, the masterclasses have been created on our website for things that do not quite fit within the curriculum, if you will, that we want to spend more time on. So please, grab your favorite beverage, a glass of water or coffee, grab your instrument. And today we will, why don't we have Nathan tell us what would be the purpose of this masterclass overall? Welcome to Jazz Guitar Lessons, where we help guitarists learn jazz faster, express themselves more fluently, and have fun along the way. My name is Mark, and if you're looking to learn jazz, form better practice habits, and especially if you enjoy a French accent, make sure to subscribe.
So this masterclass, it's a topic that's really close to my heart. It's the idea of, I don't want to say the analogy of music and language, because I like to actually make them true parallels. Music and language are the same thing. And I know that this is kind of a wild concept for a lot of people. It's like, well, you're not using words, and you're not. It's like, well, if you really get down to the idea of what language is supposed to do, it's an art that helps you communicate and connect with other people. English is one, and French, and all the other the spoken languages. Mm-hmm. They're really used for communicating concrete ideas. But music, not so much. That's, I think, the main difference, and I think that's one of the things you've written down, where it's like we don't actually have to communicate. And actually, it's something that Victor Wooten has said, bassist Victor Wooten. It's not about communicating. It doesn't have to be understood, and I think he meant literally understood.
If I may, I have this, since I'm a teenager and I've been practicing music, one thing I noticed about music is music is the only purely abstract art form. I mean, it will speak to your emotions, it will have you have a memory about a song or chord progression, but ultimately, if you watch a dancer, you can associate moves to, this dancer is now sad, or you can see, and even paintings or even abstract visual art is still not as abstract as music. And even historians say that musical currents are always late by a few decades for that same reason. If there's a current in writing, Romantic era, it took like 2 or 3 decades for Beethoven and the Romantic composers to catch up, just because it's abstract. There's no concept that we're trying to communicate. So great point, Nathan.
Yeah, I heard that they loosely parallel in that way, but again, by a late amount of a couple of years, a few decades. I love this idea that music is a language and not it's like a language. And I tell this to all my students, so any of my private students that are listening will be like, oh yeah, here he goes again.
So just to be quick and clear, doing a quick rundown of what we'll be doing today, we wanted together to shed a light on this analogy and a parallel, and we want to look at how maybe hacks you can have into your playing instead of always looking at the alphabet, because I know some of my students, they do that. They practice scales and arpeggios and scales and arpeggios. I'm like, well, why are you still memorizing the alphabet? You've done that in first grade. You don't need to, So we want to do that and provide with some alternative means of practice that are as technical as the contents that we talked about. In the curriculum, we talk about content. We talk about scales, talk about chord progressions, we talk about guide tones, we talk about all these techniques, and now we will introduce phrasing, density, silences, subdividing, the rhythmic feel, the phrase length, accents, dynamics. We will speak about all the technical non-music theory, if that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to cover. So let's just start with a quick bio. As you know, probably, I'm Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net. I started this website in 2009, and I've started with YouTube videos and a blog, and now we grew the website to over 50,000 visitors per month, over 50,000 YouTube subscribers. And at the point of shooting this video, we run a program called the Jazz Guitar Mastery Program. And basically, I've helped thousands of guitarists, get accustomed to playing in the jazz style. And Nathan, you've joined me a few years back, right?
Yeah, late 2016, I believe, I started doing some technical work for you, and I think I wrote one article for you as well on
Oh yeah.
focusing on performance in jazz, not necessarily again about the vocabulary and the alphabet, as you said as a metaphor, but focusing on like being on stage and what it means to connect to an audience and connect with your bandmates. So shortly after that, I think you hired me on as the curriculum builder in early 2017. And ever since, we've been cranking out some courses for the Jazz Guitar Mastery program. I think around 10, I think we did that year in 2017.
Oh yes.
10.
Oh, we had a really good run. I remember. That's the bulk of the program now.
Yeah. We've slowed down on producing courses since then, and just sort of trying to tighten up the curriculum and make sure it's very cohesive. But ever since, we've introduced new products and new ideas together, and happy to be a part of the team, honestly.
Fantastic. So let's jump in immediately into the content.
Sounds good. So when we talk about the language of music and music as a language, we're not the first ones to talk about this, of course. There's been a few musicians forever, I'm sure, that have talked about this. Victor Wooten is one I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this masterclass. He has a now famous TED Talk, and I think also turned into like a TED Ed video called. He talks about music as a language, and he discusses these ideas that the way that we learn the English language or whatever your native tongue is as a baby, learning from your parents with. I guess you could say professional speakers, or at least expert speakers is what I should say.
Expert speakers.
Yeah. Your parents are experts in the language of English, and you are immediately supposed to start engaging with them right away. In music, though, we don't. He talks about this idea that we don't have people who are beginner musicians playing with expert musicians right away. They have them, taught step by step by teachers, which is great and it works, but it takes a long time. And he argues that supplementary to that, or at least maybe just as important as that, is this idea that we have to get beginner speakers of music, of jazz, playing with expert speakers right away, fumbling through the notes, the words, the vocabulary, trying to string sentences together, and jamming, in other words.
Jamming. This is actually I've read Victor Wooten's book recently. He wrote 2 or 3, but that one, the music lesson, and it's sort of woo-woo at some parts. It's kind of crazy. But he says exactly that. It's like, well, as a toddler, you're just trying to imitate, and you don't worry about the syntax and saying the correct words, whatever. You just try your best, But it seems like with the music education, there's like, oh, there's a correct way my instructor told me to do it, versus just going on and jamming, which would be more almost like learning by osmosis. And I guess he defends the point that it will take way less time. Is that what you mean with the TED Talk?
Yeah, and I think for my own personal idea of this, my interpretation of that thought train, I think the more time idea comes from the fact that I think the way that we traditionally do it, with teachers saying there's a correct way to do it, make sure to do it this way, and that's really good for building practice. It takes more time because there's a fear element that gets introduced. It's like, I don't want to play a wrong note. I'm scared of doing this. I remember I was supposed to comp for one of my earliest guitar teachers when I first started taking guitar. My very first lesson with him, he taught me some chords for Heart of Gold, Neil Young, and I was supposed to just now play those chords for me while I solo. And I'm like,
what?
With what rhythm? With what do I do? Like, I have the chords, but how do I do this? He's like, just try it out. It's okay. And I tried it out. I jammed with my dad a lot. I did that with my parents.
I didn't know your dad played guitar.
Yeah. He taught me guitar in the beginning. I started with piano. Okay. I quit because I got really bored of the RCM, Royal Conservatory of Music stuff.
Understand.
And then I started jamming with my dad on guitar. I think it was like a year or so after that I sort of started getting curious about guitar. And my dad was like, my mom said, like, why don't you teach him guitar? You gotta teach him guitar. And my dad's like, Let him come to it. Let him come to it. I don't want to push him into like I did into piano, right? Like they pushed me into piano, and that was cool. That was really valuable for me. It's just the music that I was learning wasn't the music that I was listening to, and I think there's another disconnect there.
Absolutely. That's what I wanted to mention. It's like you get these books and these things, and then you know, as a kid, my mom was driving around, and there was Celine Dion and the Ghostbusters soundtrack in the car. I'm like, why am I not learning? You know, why am I not learning this? And this is what's in my ears all day long. And yeah, there's a major disconnect. But just to come back to the whole language analogy, to what Victor Wooten brought up, and how your dad was reluctant to teach you guitar as regular dad reaction, I believe. In this masterclass, we wanted just to come across that music, it uses the same, let's say, brain patterns as learning a language. Because I written a few points, and this is like a corny, like sort of a reductionist view of saying, well, the letters in your alphabet are like notes and pitches, and your words are like a few notes or a lick, and then your sentences are full musical phrases. And you can say a paragraph in a book would be like a one chorus of a solo, and then you can have a chapter, and then etc., an entire album. But the point we're trying to make here is that seeing music learning more as a language and less as a mathematical formula. Like, you know, what's that scale to play on that chord? You know, we get that question all the time, Nathan.
Yeah, definitely in jazz. Like,
yeah.
I see it sometimes in rock too, rock guitar. It's like, well, wow, what do you, or more technical styles of guitar, like shred and metal, different metal subgenres. Gent. And like, what are you playing over, you know, in technical death metal? What scale are you playing over that? You see that sometimes, but definitely, like, when I hear that idea, I think jazz right away. That when I think of those questions, it's immediately jazz, right?
It's more formulaic, and it seems that someone that plays rock and folk all his life, even on a very high level, it's like they go, well, of course chord, of course that scale, but then what comes into play is more like, how does it feel to play? How does it feel when you hear it? How does it move you, right? So that's why we want to wrap up this introduction and say, well, the language analogy is that there is a formula, to the same as your grammar and your syntax is important if you want to convey an idea in a speech or in a book, but that's not all there is to it. There's selection and this and that and idioms and go on.
What's that famous jazz song? It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it, right? That's what gets results. All those, like the morphemes and the syntax and the grammatical structure and rules of a sentence are akin or exactly the same as what we learn in music theory for music. But it's not all there is, and there's also a really heavy Western bias on like melody and harmony,
the content,
and to a much lesser extent rhythm. But then all the musical elements beyond that don't often get talked about, such as inflection and articulation, dynamics. And I don't even know which part of the metaphor I'm talking about anymore. Am I talking about music? Am I talking about English? Am I
Absolutely. And it's interesting because that's exactly what Victor Wooten's teacher in the book says. He just shows up and says, you know, guys call it, like even colleges call it music theory, but actually they should call it note theory. Because all you learn about is how to stack notes together and form melodies, etc. Yeah. So just to conclude on this brief introduction on what music as a language is, I will say this. I've been reading a book. I'm not quite finished. It's Carla. I forgot. I should have brought the reference with me. It's called The Language of Emotions. The Language of Emotions. Human emotions. And they found that there's IQ tests where you can say, oh, that's your spatial intelligence, whatever. But in the 80s or 90s, researchers have found out that there are, I think, 7 different kinds of intelligences. If you talk about an athlete, he'll have a very good spatial intelligence. Basketball player, hockey player, football player, right?
Right, the geometry of your spatial coordinates, right?
Yeah, and that's a type of intelligence, quote unquote. And emotional intelligence is one. We hear more and more about this. But then she says that your intelligence when it comes to hearing things and interpreting language, she says, they call it musical intelligence, but actually it speaks also to your skills as a public speaker. Can you give a toast? Like giving a toast at a party and maintaining your cool and having the right sentences and, wait for the punchline, all these things. Those are very musical skills.
Definitely.
So that's, and it's not about the words. It's not about the notes. It's not about the arpeggios. It's not about the chord progression. So
all of those things are foundational for it. It's like the first step and the first step only. After that, if you want to be a really good public speaker, if you want to be if you want to be Steve Jobs on stage, or if you want to be Wes Montgomery on stage, it's like you said, it's very similar elements of the performance of the art, the language art, the musical art, right? And
it goes beyond ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like this is the idea you want to communicate, but communicating it is the most important part, right? Just because you have a good idea doesn't mean that it gets communicated properly, right?
Agreed. So that's what we will be doing in the rest of this masterclass. So hopefully you're on board with us and watching and friendly. So we will go on and go to the next section when we'll talk about, maybe the danger of looking at it dryly and as not how we would advise you to look at it, and then solutions to that. And then we will dig directly into techniques. So we'll see you there. All right. So before we dig into actually the techniques we want to explore and the things that are not the contents as much as the container or the means of expression, let me just speak to the danger of focusing only on the notes and chords, meaning focusing on the theory as a formula, right? So this is the danger. And in the sense is you do not want to become that player. This is what we're going to tell you. And also the fact that this applies mostly what we're talking about now to improvised soloing, meaning single note, but it also does apply if you want to comp behind a singer or soloist. You shouldn't be looking at this from a formula standpoint. So we're just looking at more parallels and analogies. Practicing scales all the time for your soloing, just scales, is akin to rememorizing the alphabet all the time. It's just notes, right? You need the technical fluency, but you have to realize when you know it and when you've learned, your scales, right? So it's not conducive to understanding the words if you just practice the alphabet, right? You don't build phrases. So a better way to go about this would be and we'll talk about this later, would be about constraints. Like what about you have a part of a scale, or how about it's on a single string or during this progression, or you're trying to play short notes, long notes. All right. Another danger is to practicing licks all the time, which a lot of players do. Like what licks can I play over the giant steps progression so it passes to the chords? And this is
1 2 3 5 1 2 3 5 1 2
yeah,
3,
that
5.
one. The one. So this is okay because even Coltrane's solo, the original on giant steps, has some of that in it. But if this is all you do, it's almost like you're memorizing the spelling bee, like you're spelling words all the time, and it's not leading you to building your own musical phrases. And ultimately, expression comes to, you're not memorizing then the alphabet and then words all the time to become a good public speaker. That's still our analogy.
It's interesting, if I may jump in, actually, the thing that I find that us as teachers, you and I as teachers, do that a lot of students end up getting. It's like in a lesson, you get loaded with a lot of information usually, and usually we try to keep it down to a minimum amount of information so that it's absorbable. But over the course of many years, you get some messages that stick out in your mind, and so oftentimes it's like, learn licks.
Oh yeah,
go ahead and definitely learn them, and play your scales to make sure you know them. But usually those are the types of messages that get said, that get memorized by students, or at least that stick in students' minds. Yeah. But then they forget the next steps, which is like, that's just the first step. The first step is like, get them, learn the licks, learn your scales, but then take them further. So do interesting, creative things with restrictions on those licks, on those scales. Take it further and create more vocabulary, or at least synthesize your own style of speaking. Right?
And by all means, don't go on stage and play scales and licks.
No.
That's message, right? So learning scales, okay, but so long as this is not what you do and you improvise all the time. Learning words is okay. Same with musical phrases and things that are really plug and play that pass through chords. You can probably learn good sentences, and that's what I wrote down. Birds of a feather. You have this idiom that you can complete. The point is, even if you memorize all English idioms, you still need to tie all of this together into a coherent story that you can tell someone, right? So ultimately, those are the danger, and you need to do it all. You need to learn the licks, you need to learn the scales, learn the idioms. You need to do so well, but you need to not become a robot. So just now I scared you with all these dangers. Now I'll go ahead and give a bit of a solution. So you need to become like any other language, you need to become fluent with jazz. Hey guys, just a quick note. If you're enjoying this content and you're eager to boost your own jazz guitar playing, then connect with us. We've transformed the jazz skills of thousands of guitarists. You can find the link in the description or head directly over to jazzguitarlessons.net to begin your journey. All right, let's dive back into the episode. This is not formulaic. Like if you start to learn a foreign language, Indian, Russian, Mandarin, Chinese, you will have to work on the alphabet and words, but you will need to do much more than that, which is this workshop. And so you need context, word meaning. You'll be able to create longer sentences and paragraphs and be more conversational. And my last point, which calls back to this book I've been reading on the emotions, is it's all going through your ears. So if you attempt to do any of this without the use of your ears, meaning that you rely on your brains and your fingers more, then you're not really learning to speak jazz. It's not going to be very connected.
Right. It's so easy for us to like learn licks and turn our brains off and not really learn how to understand it. And to like really drive the connection between music and language really home, to drive that point home, I think it's super important, and I teach all my students this, to try and sing all your lines. Every single line that you play, every chord that you play. I got a few students who really swear by it now because they're awesome. Hearing it better. It's like it's the immediate connection. It's like, okay, so I'm playing these things on guitar, but it can very easily become a place second finger at X point and place third finger here. It's just like following a set of instructions. But if you actually try to sing those lines, you're like, oh, this is how it actually sounds, and I can feel it in my body, how it sounds and how it fits into a piece of music. That's really hard for some people who've never sung before, especially if you've gone most of your adult life without singing. Oh, yeah. I'd say start now. It's hard, but it's ultimately worth it because it's not really for the sake of singing. It's for the sake of hearing better. Connecting.
Yeah, I agree. And that's how some people told me, Kurt Rosenwinkel, famous jazz player, famous jazz guitarist. And I was like, I don't know if I'm into it. And guys, they go like, dude, you hear this guy soloing. It's like he's not plugging the guitar into his amp. He's plugging the guitar into his heart. It's like, it's crazy. It's so
amazing.
That's what we're striving for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so with all of that said, I think it's really important that we talk about various things that you can do as a speaker of jazz, of music and of jazz in general, to make the how you say it better in your playing, no matter what, how you practice that. So we're definitely focusing, as jazz musicians, we tend to focus on what we say. The notes, the sentences, the phrases, the licks, but
and also why I saw that on YouTube videos sometimes, like, why are you allowed to play a C note over that chord? Like, I don't know. The jazz police did not come and arrest me, so I guess I'm allowed.
Yeah, I wasn't caught yet.
I wasn't caught yet. Not yet, but now it's public on YouTube. Who knows, right?
Exactly. I love the idea that it's like you have to. It's legitimate if no one calls you out on it, or it's legitimate because I did it first. I'm actually writing a jazz tune, and I'm like, are we able to do all of this, metric modulation that we end up doing in the solo? And we looked at each other and we said, like, my drummer and I looked at each other and said, like, well, Larnell did it. He set a legal precedent for it. So we called it the legal precedent. Larnell Lewis from Snarky Puppy.
Legal precedent. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So it's like, this is crazy. Can we do this? I mean, someone else sort of did things like this already. So yeah, why not? But the elements that I want to focus on in this section, I think we both want to focus on in this section, are we want to talk about the not big three elements of music theory, which are melody, harmony, and rhythm to a lesser extent, but still it's part of the big three. Only lately have we talked about, like, in music theory classes in universities, is rhythm like focused on more and more. But still, like, there is so much beyond just these first three. And I think it's like what you said before. We shouldn't call it music theory class. We should call it note theory.
Note
right?
theory, yeah.
And I like this other perspective, which is we should expand the definition of music theory to music grammar, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a nice way to say it, for sure.
And we should definitely be teaching these things like articulation, things like dynamics. I got a list here. I'm going to look over at the list. I'm going to do the cheat sheet thing. Silences and like rest. Rest is super important. I think Miles Davis talked about, like, don't play the notes, play the negative space.
Yeah. Also, we said play on your third impulse. There's
third impulse.
Miles quotes. Yeah.
We talk about that one in Improv 103, I think.
Yeah.
We do an entire, like, interlude section on it. In fact, we want to talk about, like, articulating on guitar. That's a big thing in a lot of more shred styles, rock and heavy metal and technical metal and things like that. Where you're talking about, like, how exactly are you articulating it with your pick? Are you slurring? Are you hammering on, pulling off?
Yeah.
Repetition. Adam Neely, the YouTuber, he talks about, like, repetition legitimizes. Repetition. But there's all these different elements that we want to talk about. So I think you and I have some ideas on how to practice each of these elements individually.
Yeah. So my first point will be on this. So we will attempt to give you one or two ways to do the following. Before we do so, before we say dynamics and we go on a tangent, because we will ramble and go on tangents. It's just actually Nathan and I we could do this off camera all day. When we chat. So one of the things I want to just get off my chest right away is this is one of the reasons, if you take the curriculum and you use, say, Improv 101, Improv 102, and 103, there are so many videos in which we do call and response, meaning your instructor plays a little bit and then you play a little bit. It's to have that jamming factor. You're a 2-year-old and you don't really speak, and then your uncle comes in and say, "Hey, are you a little baby?" And then you're like, blah 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 blah. Today I went to the park, but you can't understand what he's saying, but at least you're trying. So we are attempting to give you all these little non-note theory magic things just by osmosis. You listen to Marc play, and we don't go at length at the fact, look in between these two notes, there was a longer silence than usual.
Or look at the change in dynamics between this phrase and the next phrase.
Yeah, look, I installed new pickups so the dynamics could be clear. It's like all these subtle things. Like, no, we can't teach that. Well, actually, we're allowing ourselves to teach that in this masterclass today, but we can't teach the feel and this, and that's why it's so important to do it with an instructor. And not friggin' learn from ebooks, as a lot of people try to do online. It's like you can't learn syntax and grammar for an ebook because it's not formulaic.
Yeah. So, our notation, our staff notation, our tablature notation only gives you note and rhythmic information.
That's it.
So it's not going to give you. I mean, you can put in dynamics, but it's something that has to be interpreted. All of that stuff is meant to be interpreted by the experts already. And if you're not an expert, it's hard to interpret something that you don't have a taste for or the skill for. Two different elements, right?
Yeah. So I think by expert, you do mean classical musicians reading a score set mezzo forte, and they know they have to play a certain volume.
Exactly. Yeah, that too. Just anyone who knows their instrument really, really well already. Like the uncle who comes in and talks to you versus the baby who is just learning the notes first of all, the notes, the words I meant. Getting our analogies mixed up.
Sorry. So, do you want to set the ball and talk about the first one?
Yeah, let's talk about
notifications.
Sure, no problem. Let's talk about dynamics. I think that's the. So my wife is a Baroque violinist, and dynamics are such a huge component of what they're playing. She talks about how, like, early Baroque music isn't exactly the most out there harmonically or even melodically. Sometimes there's some really gorgeous pieces. Of course, there's plenty of gorgeous pieces. J.S. Bach is late Baroque, mid to late Baroque, and he talks about he has amazing pieces that move through such beautiful melody and harmony and stuff. but it's really in the dynamics and the way that you emphasize certain parts. What'd you do?
Nothing. It's just I have notifications on my computer. It's like, oh, I should have turned those off before.
Nonstop. But there's the interest is again in how you play it, right? And how you swell to really really loud sections, and how you bring the house down when you go to like a really quiet section. You think about like blues players, how there are very stark dynamic contrasts in blues 12/8 ballads, right? Where like huge solo building, and then it just like gets to the end of the form, and like the whole band just comes straight down, and it's just the guitar.
Yeah.
You hear John Mayer do this. You hear amazing classic blues artists do this like crazy, like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
It's so effective.
Yeah.
And just so I don't want to sound I don't know what the word would be, condescending. No, that's not the right word. I have the word in French, but I just want to define. So when we're talking about dynamics, we're essentially just saying, like, how loud are you playing?
Yeah. Let's just simplify it.
Yeah, it's just like, just so we're clear, it ranges from a whisper all the way to screaming.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I wanted to get clear. And what Nathan has said, just to summarize, is that they're so effective. And something I will reiterate that I took note of is dynamics work better if you're alone. They work way better when they're exaggerated. When you think you have to play soft, play even softer than that. And if you want to play loud, you exaggerate, and then the contrast will be stark. It will be much clearer.
Oh yeah, I gotta tell my students all the time. It's not enough, right? Like no matter how much you think you're doing, it's not enough. Anyone who's been in a dance class, as a like in a partner dance class as a leader, or anyone who's been in a drama class in high school, the drama teacher will always say, like, you can always lead more. You can always give more range of expression. If you want to go super quiet, go super quiet. Yeah. And obviously, I didn't do it there. So
Alec Baldwin on a set, which is just going like, yeah, we'll see you in court. People are saying, man, we're freaked out. We don't even think the mic will pick up what he's saying. He comes to a whisper, and it's nuts. But so let's just dig in. Like, how would you do it? How do we practice dynamics? Let's pick one thing.
One easy thing off the bat is, like, just for every phrase that you play it at a different static volume. So don't even bother with sweeping between dynamic ranges yet.
All right. So let me pick one, and we'll do a E-flat blues. So any phrase I play, so this is the one. Louder?
Yeah. Go like whisper quiet now.
Oh, it forces me to shape the notes differently too, right?
It changes a lot, and you start noticing these things.
Okay, and then somewhere in the middle. Swelling to loud, from loud to soft.
Go back, go reverse that now.
So from loud to soft.
From super soft to super loud. And I think one thing that, like you said, you start understanding the subtleties of what these dynamic changes offer. And so you start having to say, I actually want to get to the really loud, or which note in here when I'm swelling is supposed to be really loud? What's the note that I want to emphasize with dynamics? And then, or reverse emphasize, like through quietness, which note do I want to make, like the note that people have to lean in to listen to, right?
Yeah.
That's the effect of dynamics is like you either blow people away and be like, and like feel the energy with that, feel the energy with you, or you make people lean in close and be like, what's that he's saying?
What's that? Yeah.
It's quiet.
But that reminds me a lot of how some famous producer or musician described Pat Metheny's playing. He says, every time Pat is playing, it's almost as if he's saying, I have something really important to tell you. I check this out. And every line is that, like, what? And you want to lean in and he's just taking you and telling a big story. So
there's at least one or two people like this in our lives, I'm sure. But I remember a pianist, I won't name him, but there's a pianist that went to school with me in the same year at Carleton University in Ottawa. And he super chill guy, amazing player, really sweet, like real sweetheart, like really nice guy. But he was always so chill and soft spoken. And so I remember he had to lead one of our bands, and he wouldn't yell to get our attention. He'd just sit there for a second and look at us, and then he'd quietly say, "So we're gonna do this next." And the energy that he had was so chill and still authoritative, but in like a really serene way. And yeah, it made you listen. It made you be like, I need to shut up so I could hear this guy. Right?
That's awesome. So let's do dynamics. We've got them covered. There's way more we want to cover. So let's go quickly. So
Sure.
one thing students can do is just pick a phrase that repeat it and just stage them at different levels of dynamics, from very loud to soft, and then maybe swell in between. Start the phrase soft, go all the way loud, or start loud, go soft, or even go from soft to loud and back. They can do that. Maybe I'll do a course of, oh, sorry, Nathan, you wanted to...
I also want to emphasize that it's important to not just think of soft and loud, but also the middle ground. What's your middle speaking ground? And try to swell between at least those three. And I think that gives people a good starting point for dynamics. It says, like, here are the targets for you.
Okay, and let me just do another example. I'll just use a metronome. I'll do B-flat blues, and it's a chill 144, so it's a 72. And I'll just try to play. And unfortunately, because of Zoom, COVID, we can't really jam together here. But I will try to see if I can improvise a chorus or two and just demonstrate that I can play loud, I can play soft, I can play somewhere in the middle while I'm soloing. And I'll play pretty simple. So let's do, you know this one. Like that.
Nice. I love it. I want to point out to everybody listening that Marc isn't just improvising single note lines. He's not just thinking about this. This is a little bit of a tangent, but he's not just thinking about like, I need to do the chorus of improv. I need to do a chorus of comping, like we usually separate in our courses. Marc is thinking about all of the elements together. He's thinking like this requires a chord, this requires something else, and those things aren't separate in his mind. They're all part of the vocabulary of jazz guitar.
One thing.
And so I think it's really important that we all think about that as we play through a song. And it still sounded like a B flat blues, no matter what element. kind of. More or less.
All right, so the next item in our list of non-big three elements of music that you can experiment with is silences. And basically it's saying, if you're thinking of jazz improvisation specifically, you were saying you add space between the lines, meaning make sure you rest. In other words, if you're a brass player, you don't have that problem because you need to breathe. And sometimes the issue with guitarists or pianists or even violinists is that we can play forever. We don't need to play. So we'll have a little bit of a demonstration. So I demonstrated a bit on dynamics with my guitar. Nathan here will demonstrate how can you put silences in between your phrases. And one of the clear things I like to do is you stop long enough so that your previous phrase is digested, if you will. It's one of my tricks, one of my tips. You wanted to add anything, Nathan, before demonstrating?
No, I think one of the first things we'll expand on this later with this idea of phrasing and pacing, like especially like Miles Davis style pacing that we talk about in Improv 103. But I guess the way I'll demonstrate it right now is just ad hoc silences.
Yeah.
Nothing prescribed, but just be like, make sure to put a silence.
Consciously stop playing.
Yeah.
which is something a lot of our students don't do.
Yeah, I'm going to actually, we mentioned, like the drama students before, be more exaggerated with what you're doing. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take my hands off the guitar and put them in the air, and then pick up again later on. So that's the exercise. I want you to every now and then, play a phrase and then make sure to take your hands off the guitar. Isn't there a Coltrane?
That's a Schofield one.
The Schofield one?
Yeah.
I think also Coltrane was talking to Miles Davis, and he's like, Miles, how do I stop playing? I just can't stop playing sometimes. Just take the horn out of your damn mouth. Right?
That sounds like Miles. Yeah.
Probably use more swear words, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. I have the metronome set at 60 beats per minute on 2 and 4. So we're playing at 120 beats per minute, a nice and easy medium blues. I'll play a B flat blues as well. So here, I'll move the camera down so you can see my guitar. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Hands off the guitar, right?
1.
B flat. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a long phrase. 4. Well, that's my notifications too. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Nice. Yeah. So we're back to the top of the floor. Anyway, so that's the idea, is like, just get uncomfortable with how much silence is being played and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. And
I'd say, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
one of my instructors had said this, actually said, well, how much silence should I play? And he said, ultimately, if you want to play for real, like, you should only play what you hear. Like, but I don't hear anything. It's like, well, you might play 2 notes in a chorus, and don't do that all the time. I mean, don't walk on stage and play 1 note and go, I guess I'm done. Don't do that by all means, but you can practice that. If it means you're playing just 1 lick of every chorus of blues, and you force yourself to do something very consciously, which is playing silences, it sort of creeps in the rest of your playing into your subconscious, right?
Yeah, there's something really sincere about that, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, don't do this all the time. Obviously, you want to have something to say, but doing this will allow you to, as you said, have this mentality creep into your consciousness. I think a really important overarching idea to learning anything at all, not just the elements that we're talking about here, but anything at all, is that you're only learning if you are pushing your boundaries. Yeah. If you're doing something that's comfortable, that you're like, oh yeah, I'm good at this. Well, you're already good at it.
You're not learning anything. Yeah, I agree.
If you're uncomfortable because you're not good at it, that's exactly where you need to be, and you need to push that boundary a little bit at a time. Take breaks, pace yourself. Don't try to like become a master all in one day. It doesn't happen. You'll burn yourself out, and you'll psychologically destroy yourself.
so long as you expand your consciousness a little bit on things that are possible. So far, I just want to recap and go to the next point. We talked about dynamics. We talked about silences. That was pretty obvious. Let's just jump in immediately in articulations. So for guitarists, we are in the luck, because as Nathan said, for metal shredders and whatever, and all the things I used to do when I was a kid, really, I used to, people don't believe me, whatever. We can talk about staccato versus legato. We can talk about slurs. We can talk about sliding in, long notes, short notes. We can talk about bends. We can talk all sorts of things. So let me just say, it could be a worthwhile experiment if you've never done it, to look at 1 note and just go, how does it feel to go versus, or even same if you're just playing quarter notes versus, having long notes. And we don't have the luxury in jazz of the the classical notation to tell us where to slow and where to articulate, where to breathe and whatnot. So you have to create this. Slurs will be maybe a slide. If you have notes that you want to play, say, can you play, but could you play it, or could you play, there's so many ways to replay the same two things, and you can just consciously make an effort to do that. We talked about staccato, legato, long note, short note, slurs, slides, bend. Blues guys and rock guys know all about bends. What else could you talk about, Nathan? Do you have other ideas?
Well, actually, on that point on articulations, there's a great video by Adam Neely, the YouTuber I mentioned earlier.
Oh yes,
where there's a segment of the video. It's from his the worst jazz solo of all time video that he released recently. So there's a segment in it where he talks about playing a one-note solo. There's a rich tradition of history of playing one-note solos in saxophones and guitars and rock and rhythm and blues, the 1950s genre and stuff. But the idea here is that how can you take one note and make it musical? I mean, there's he even mentions the song One Note Samba.
Oh yeah,
right? The Antonio Carlos Jobim song, right?
Is it? It's not a Jobim song, is it? It is a Gershwin song.
No, One Note Samba is Samba de una nota so or something like that.
Oh, that's right. But which one? Which samba? There's a bossa or a samba that's a Gershwin one.
Oh, I don't.
Is it there? Oh, maybe I'm mistaken. Never mind. Sorry,
I can't think of it. But that particular one is ba ba da 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 da. Great song, like fantastic. But anyway, he goes through this exercise in the middle of the video where Adam Neely, where he's a bassist, and he plays one note in something like 17 different ways. Talks about the things that you mentioned, like slurs and long slides, short slides into it.
Oh, okay.
Slides from above, downward.
Oh, okay. So you mean like this, like...
Yeah, or a short slide from above.
Versus...
Yeah. And then a short one. Okay. Exactly.
Got it.
Makes a big difference. And he talks about just basically like pounding out all the variations of playing one note and seeing how you can do it, playing it on different strings. This isn't about articulations, but guitars are very particular for hammering on, pulling off.
Or right.
Exactly. Things like we talk about slides, we talk about slurs, we talk about bending for guitars. Okay. It's huge. Playing with your fingers versus playing with your pick. This isn't exactly articulation anymore, but
still, it affects the sound that comes out. It sounds different.
Yeah.
Timbre.
Yeah, timbre, exactly. There's a lot that you do on the Standard Essential series where you are palm muting, and you're pointing out in the instructions.
Oh yes.
How you're palm muting certain notes, like Body and Soul. The very beginning, the first notes, you're palm muting.
Oh yeah, I go like.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how it goes. It's been a while.
I can't remember now. E flat minor.
Oh yeah.
That, yeah. Sounds different. Those three notes sound different that you're playing.
Instead of, or even with a pick, with a E. But then I go.
So what I want to do as an exercise for this idea, I want you to take one note. We're eliminating the vocabulary variable, and I want you to just take one note for a little bit and just play a musical one-note solo that maybe isn't over a blues or anything like that, but is just like how many ways can you make one note sound musical?
That's a great exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple ways to work on articulation, because in the midst of a phrase, then you might have a note that gets very high in the scale that you decide to do longer, or staccato for effect with an accent that everything else is pretty soft, and then you have your dynamic popping up on those couple of notes. But then that's like more advanced, and that's as you develop an instinct for it, you can build phrases and have these elements of music sort of blend in.
Yeah.
Which once again is what we do with the call and answers videos. You improvise and then you watch someone who's done it, who's pretty good. Well, don't want to flatter myself, but an expert is like, oh, that's how it sounds. But then he didn't talk about playing loud notes or soft notes. But then you just do it. After a while, you do it by instinct, right?
Yeah, it goes back to that Victor Wooten idea. We can't drive this point home enough, but it's learning through osmosis. Listen to experts, listen to the legends, listen to your teachers, Mark, myself. Listen to how we play, how everyone plays as experts in the field, and just copy the way that they do it. You'll learn the notes. We're teaching them to you and everything like that. Don't worry about them too much. Over time, you'll do that, but keep an ear out at all times for absorbing through osmosis the articulations, the silences, the short notes, the long notes, the dynamics. Definitely the dynamics.
Yeah.
There are more elements that we want to talk about. If I recall, but just with these first three ideas, there's infinite variability already.
Oh yeah, you're like in the realm of amazing. So speaking of which, let's move on to. I wanted to do a brief interlude on talking about repetition, which is getting your point across, making your point, often by repeating a part of a sentence in a speech or the same part. It's an effect, and a lot of I just played earlier. I played the. That's tenor madness, and tenor madness is that blues head. Again. How more repetitive can this get? People like, I don't like rock music and punk music because it's repetitive. I'm like, you listen to jazz solos, like it's always the same things.
Yep. Exactly. It's not just about the repetition that people don't like, because repetition is a very valuable musical device. It's a very valuable public speaking device. Adam Neely says repetition legitimizes. If you do something and you're not sure if it's the right thing to do, or as a listener you're not sure if they meant to do that, you're not sure if they were sincere, and if they double down and no, I want you to understand this thing. This is the one I want you to do. I'm gonna say it again. They play the same lick 2 times in a row. You're like, I guess he meant to do that. And that is kind of like a teaching hack that we have for a lot of students, where it's like, if you make a mistake, play the same mistake again. Just double down on it. And it's a little bit...
Dig yourself a hole and try to get out yourself after.
Yeah. Exactly. Maybe that's not a good way of teaching it, because it's not exactly sincere, but the idea is that we're trying to counteract that fear we talked about earlier, where it's like, don't worry about mistakes.
All mistakes.
Go ahead and play mistakes. Play them again, and then that sort of takes away the fear of, or at least it allows you to deal with the fear of improvising, composing on the spot, right?
Yeah, agreed. So let me do a quick demonstration. Actually, speaking of B-flat blues, let's do it again. I will do a B-flat blues where I'll use repetition. And just to give you a key exercise, what you can do is aim to repeat 3 times. The rule of 3. In comedy, you have it. If you want a solid punchline, you just do it 3 times. The third time, like boom. You could elect to modify the 3rd time slightly before moving on to the next idea. So as Nathan has said earlier, I'll try to exaggerate this. And once again, we're at a comfortable 72. So it's a 144. Let me do B-flat blues again. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's time to move on. Then short repetition. Long repetition. Something like that. So that was an example. There was several kinds of repetition. There were repetitions that before I got to my 3rd time, it took like 8 bars, but then then you're already done your 3 repeats within like a bar and a half, right? Any comments you wanted to add on this, Nathan? I see you like on the edge of your seat. Like, yeah, but Mark,
more variability. If you're wanting to explore more variability in the idea of repetition, so Mark was already touching on that. You get short repetitions, you get longer bars that you're trying to copy and paste, and the more harmonically, the more in harmonic accordance you are with the chords, the harder that'll be over other chords, especially when the chords change keys, things like that. But the idea there is that, like with Tenor Madness, you might want to just adapt the same line, especially for longer phrases. This is hard, but you might want to just adapt the exact same line that you played to the new key. So just change, the key now has D flats. Well, I can't play D naturals anymore. I'm just going to lower that down to a D flat.
One or two notes will change, and then you can just repeat the same lick and run your analysis over what stays and what changes.
Yeah, exactly.
D flat is a really good example, actually.
So like, Tenor Madness. How does it go? I just lost this. So like it's D, B flat, and G. It's just a G minor triad. But then when you get to the E flat chord, you have to play a D flat. So you get this G diminished triad. Right? So, and you take that entire line, which has repetition inside itself. You repeat it again, but again with.
That's the head, actually.
Yeah, riff blues are great for that idea of three or repeating thrice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
that word.
And then like blues in general is exactly that. It's here's the setup, repeat the setup, punchline. That's what the blues is.
Mm-hmm. That's the call and answer and conclude.
Yeah, that's another way to do it. Another way of looking at it.
I used to teach that to beginners like non-jazz. Just go like, we're going to play a 12-bar blues. Your job is to play 3 phrases. The first 4 bars, you play your call. Second 4 bars, play your answer. And last 4 bars sort of conclude it. So just to segue into the next point, which I wrote down. So you can do repetition. Also, there's one, I don't know what he's doing here in my thoughts, but you know that player Eric Johnson? Famous like modern blues player, but very like not a shredder, but a very, very fast and virtuoso player.
Direct descendant of Robert Johnson, right? No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
But yes.
But Eric Johnson is. It's interesting to listen to his solos sometimes because he's probably half improvising, half preparing his stuff. But one thing you can notice, whether you're into that stuff or not. He sounds like he's 2 guitarists.
Yeah.
He will play a phrase and then stop, and then there's that answer. And I don't know if he did it on purpose on 2 tracks or whatever, but I mean, when you hear really, really good jazz players, they do that a lot. It's like, so the exercise here would be a sort of repetition that would be an answer to yourself. Almost like, yes, you can repeat things, but you can go, do your pause, your silence, and then go, hey, if you heard that, what would you like to reply? Like, what's your answer to that? And then you can go on and answer yourself. It's a great way to pace your solo and add silences.
That really comes down to this idea of listening to yourself, right? You have to be listening to what you play. Like, I've said that to a lot of students in the past. Like, are you listening to yourself right now? Like, did you hear what you just said?
That sounded so bad.
Not really.
Are you listening to yourself, man? What?
Oh, God. I swear I'm not that mean in lessons. I'm not that mean in lessons.
It's just mean enough.
Exactly. But actually, a really good way of doing this to hack it immediately, to really hear the like, we're going back to that drama student idea, like exaggerate the differences. So one way to do this is to play a phrase in the low register and then change registers drastically in your next phrase. Mm-hmm. And so you could play a similar line in like 2 octaves higher or 1 octave higher, but because it's in a different register and it's usually on a different set of strings, it'll feel like a different instrument, different voice. The strings are a different thickness, they have different timbre, en français. It'll sound like a different instrument as a result, or at least enough of a different instrument that it feels like a response to your call.
That's a really good hack. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to move on to the next exercise. So just to recap, so far we have 5. Talked about dynamics, silences, articulations, different ways of making a single note sound, repetition, making your point, repetition, answering to yourself, that hack with different registers. Next, I wrote down things about motivic development. And it goes without saying well, we all know them. Right? And Mozart wrote, 12 variations, or is it 16 variations?
I don't remember.
There's 12. Yeah, so there's 12 variations on that theme, but the essence of composing ultimately is always to have that literal entry point, which is a small motif. Da-da-da-da.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's like 15 minutes of da-da-da-da.
Yeah. The entire piece is that, and of course some classical music pieces are much bigger than most jazz pieces.
So one thing you can put yourself through is just, and now of course early on before we started filming, Nathan and I talked about that we have faders, and one of the things we wanted to is just turn every fader down. No more chord progression and scale and complicated arpeggios and this and that. We are only looking at that single element. Now, if you're doing motivic development, if you want to have that single fader up, it's going to be difficult if you're playing on a chord progression. So maybe start with a static vamp, a single chord sounding. I'm going to do a C major chord, whatever. So you can reflect and really even take out the time element and see if you can develop. Hey, actually, let's play a game. Nathan and I will play out of time, but I'll establish a key of C major.
Okay.
Oh. And we're just going to see how much we can expand upon that piece of fragment of music, that motif I haven't decided on yet, and just see how much we can distort it and tweak it and run with it. So it still has to be recognizable from the previous element, but we will just we're going to play musical catch, if you will. All right.
Sounds good.
So. Cool. Done?
Yeah, those are all really cool ideas, and it all develops from. It all develops from this idea of a rising. For us, we heard it. We were like, it's a rising set of stepwise notes. I mean, we didn't think that, but we could feel that rising stepwise motion, and it's like, okay, cool. And then jumping back down to the original note. So the overall arc of the contour goes up and then back down to exactly the same level it started at. That's a really wordy way of describing it, but when you hear the sound, you want to just recognize it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I got it. I got the idea, right? Mm-hmm. And then you take it and you can do different things. So one of the conscious thoughts that I had was I wanted to vary up the rhythm at which I was playing the same notes. I just repeated them a couple times. Da 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 da. You what were some of your ideas for developing it?
One of the things I did was a slide in, which it felt like, I wanted to go in one of the notes for some reason. It just felt right. One reason, you took it up over the scale by using the same sort of motif. I took it down. I sort of, you want to take it up? I'm going to go the opposite way. So we contrast.
Flip it. Yeah. I love that. Well, that first idea with the slide, that goes back to the articulation idea that we had, right?
Exactly. So you can develop a motif by using any of the other previous elements we talked about, and you can even carry a motif. So I will demonstrate this just quickly because it's much harder. But you can take a chord progression, and let's not do B flat blues again. Let's do Autumn Leaves. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. E minor or
let's do E minor. So the first chord is A minor 7. Right, so even there, I'm gonna try to carry even the melodies like.
Keep the melody, yeah.
It's a perfect melody for that, but I'm going to avoid playing the melody. I'm going to think of the changes and play on the song, and I'm going to see if I can carry a motif through. So it calls back to this idea, Nathan, you brought, where you say, well, maybe you need to modify a note or a set of notes to keep the lick the same so it fits. So that's more like formulaic. It's still back in our theory, our big three, but I'm going to try to be just as organically as possible, playing on a motif and developing the motif. And I don't know what's going to give, but let's give it a shot. Ready for this?
Yep. Oh, wait, Mark?
Yes.
Sorry, could you start again? I think our audio capture didn't capture. So if you could just say something before you start playing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start with the last 4 bars. Na, da, 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 da. Something like that. So you see that Nathan's laughing. He's like, you use the mouse with the cannonball.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that thing. But the point here is that throughout, I was trying to take a look. Like, if it's a descending line, let me do the descending line. Oh, the descending line has 5 notes, but maybe the next round it's organically going to morph into 6 notes or 4 notes. Or maybe it's going to go higher, 2 more notes of the scale and go down. So it's not computed, but as Nathan, you pointed out earlier, it's about the shape. Oh, it's a descending line, right? And whether the descending line is repeated over a huge span of time, repeated again, or if it's a smaller span, or if it goes, faster or lower, or if it goes lower in the scale or higher in the scale, like, it doesn't matter. But organically, it's really easy to follow for yourself and for a listener to develop on a motif. It's almost like you're staying on topic, right? That's the language analogy.
Yeah, people. I think that's a great analogy, because it shows how people are understanding and hooking onto a single idea and expanding upon it until we all understand the various dimensions of that idea. I'd like to actually give one more exercise, a short one.
Oh yeah.
That's even more prescribed. And you can take the idea is just take a pattern, a scale sequence, or a series of notes. That's your motif, and you can just start with that and pick your key, and start that pattern on a certain note, and then take it up through the scale notes. Okay. So the idea is like. Let's see what I can do. I'm going to take that John Coltrane one. So I'm going to take the 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. Skipping the 4th note in the scale. Yeah. I'm going to say it in C major just because it's simple, right? No sharps, no flats. And I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 5. And then I'm going to say, well, what if I do that starting on D instead of C? 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5.
Just playing the notes of within that scale. You're just not moving the same fingers, right?
Exactly. I'm playing in the same key of C major, no sharps, no flats, but I'm just taking that pattern of 1, 2, 3, 5 and moving it up to the next note in the scale. And then the next note of the scale. And as Mark pointed out, the shape of the motif itself will change. However, the actual fingering will change, I should say, but the detail work will change. But the actual overall arc of the contour of that melodic fragment will stay the same. 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5.
It's a great exercise because that's even before, say, developing a motif. I call it motivic development. Before developing your motif, you can do is just take it as is and see if you can run it within a scale, almost like modulating a single lick within a scale. But it has to be a very short lick, right? Like a few notes, like 4
Exactly.
notes.
This is exactly what Marc was talking about earlier about like expanding on the idea of your scales. You know your scales. If you've like, obviously if you don't know all your scales, if you don't know your major scale very well, work on that. Just work on the scale itself. But once you've got that foundation down, push the boundary and practice your scales in scale sequences such as this one. This is setting up your motif. Like not developing it, as Marc said. This is a sort of a prescribed exercise for creating a motif in the first place, and then you can use those sequences across the scale, across the key that you're playing in, once you're actually in a song, to develop those ideas and alter it and expand upon it and morph it.
It's so good too, because this is anti-technical, because I see all the questions coming up like, which position should I do this? Should like, well, do the one you play it in. Like you don't have to worry, but should I do it in all positions? Like, no, do it in one position that allows you to make it sound nice. So it's like a non-technical exercise. Like, let's see how well you know your scales, right? It's so good. It's so
exactly. I love it. Yeah.
All right, and finally, what Nathan and I want to cover in that whole language of music thing is more, I don't want to say esoteric, but like harder things you can do to add to your solos that are non-musical. And I will go quickly over those because they're more intricate. And I think we've covered, Nathan, so far, dynamics, silences, articulations, repeating, motivic development, all these things. And now we're going to go in deeper. It's not what, but it's how you say it. And the first one I want to cover is phrasing. And I will, of course, start with a Pat Metheny story. Because actually, too, there was this old YouTube video, probably in 2010. I don't think it's up anymore, but it was young, and we say young, like 18 years old, Pat Metheny, right? You remember, like, he was very young prodigy, and he was on stage, I think, giving a clinic at Berkeley, and he grabbed a metronome, and he's like, he put the microphone on the metronome and he started to shred like over scales and over all the things you are. And it was fascinating because I'm like, all right, the metronome is clicking on 2 and 4 and he's just playing these streams of 16th notes. And it's not even that fast. It's not like impressive. But what was impressive was the feel of the notes. As you see notes written on paper, it's like, okay, there's 16th notes, or say there are 8 notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you see, da-de-da-de-da, right? But it was his laid back feel that was, oh my God, he's just, you know, if you're sitting on a chair that has 4 legs, you know, you do that. You lie down. Yeah, that. It felt like that rhythmically. Like, oh, it's like the metronome hits dead center. And he's just like laying back on all the notes all the time. And
he doesn't, he lands on the note slightly later than the metronome, right? Almost like throughout the bar, or sorry, throughout the single beat.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, and it's not just one phrase. It's like, that's how he plays. Like, oh, wow, it sounds so... And then you're like, oh, he's not really like doing the... He's just playing very, very straight, but they're late. And it swings so hard. Like, And then I guess it was 2016. I went to New Jersey with Scott, my good friend. He invited me to see Pat Metheny, Christian McBride. And it's hosted by Christian McBride, duo. And they would talk, you know, be on a sofa and just like, tell me about your childhood in Kansas City, Pat, you know, and then play a standard and then go back down, sit down and talk. And it was like an interview series, right?
It's amazing.
And I just remember because Pat came on stage before they started everything and they played of all songs, right? Because Nathan and I have been working on this one recently. What's the name of that song?
Black Orpheus.
Orpheus, thank you. And he started playing the melody, Pat, solo, no bass, and then he pluck a few chords, and then play the melody again, a few chords, and solo. That you did a bit solo version. It's Pat Metheny. So of course it was world class. But what was most impressive to me was the fact that he was, you could hear he was laying back on a pulse that he himself imposed. But there were no metronome or drummers, but yet you heard him playing, you could feel the laid backness of his things. Like, wow. So I aspire to play like that, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go really quickly through this. One exercise I would recommend people do if you're at that point in your life, set a metronome slow, take a B flat blues. That's a 2 and 4, so it's 50 2 and 4, so it's 100 BPM. And keep playing phrases and see how laid back you can be. Just practice.
You could do this with a melody to start off with if you're not familiar. Yeah. If you're worried about the notes, just play with a melody you're familiar with and then try improvising later.
Yeah.
If you like.
I will just jump the gun and start improvising, but you can do that. So B flat blues. Two. This is so hard. It's excruciating. And the slower it is, the easier it is to maintain. And then if you stretch too much, you will fall back on your face, like on the chair. Right?
Just like the chair, yeah.
So this is a feel and phrasing. Just remember, we are all culprit of rushing when we're nervous or when we don't really know the material. When we're stuck in our heads, we will rush. So in an attempt not to rush, work on your phrasing and work on getting laid back. Next topic, phrase length. This is super obvious. You want to take it away, Nathan, because it's really an easy point.
We actually just did a challenge, one of the members forum.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
on Facebook on phrase length, and we talk about this in Improv 103. So prescribed phrase length. It's really easy. Sorry, it's really hard as beginner jazz musicians to play those long phrases that jazz musicians tend to play. Bebop lines are huge; they're stretched for like 4, 5, 6 bars at a time. And sometimes you want to play short phrases. Sometimes you want to learn to play long phrases. Whichever one you have trouble with, try to set an amount of bars that you can play for, and then create a set amount of bars that you are supposed to be silent for. On the forum, I did, I think, 4 bars and then of playing, 2 bars of rest.
That's
4 bars of playing, 2 bars of rest. If you do it with a weird number, like not groups of 4 specifically, and like the actual total amount of rest and playing time is like 6 or 5 bars.
3 plus 2, things like that.
Yeah, some weird ones like that. You can you're forced to play at places in the form and rest at places in the form that you're not usually used to. It's a really good exercise. Yeah,
good exercise.
I don't think we'll demonstrate this right now, but
phrase length in all, it's like, well, you should learn to play long phrases and short phrases, and contrast between the two, depending for effect. And this segues nicely into the next exercise you could practice on, which is knowing that you can start or end your improvised phrase at any point within the measure itself. So it's a bar 4/4, and so I had a way of saying this, in order to uncover every little corner of the bar 4/4, because some corners won't be as comfortable because you don't feel your one as hard. One of the things I practice personally is playing half notes and playing Charlestons on a easy, like not even a 1/6-2-5 blues, or just 1/4-5 blues. That's super obvious. I did practice this and started to displace this by an 8th note. Do it an 8th note late, an 8th note early, and I will just point people to Ari Honig Polyrhythms DVD book. It's on Mel Bay Publishing. And for that matter, when you say you have phrase lengths of various lengths and you can start them in different places of the bar, the only natural next step would be to start or end phrases naturally within the form itself. So if you have a 12-bar blues, can you start your phrase on bar 3? Or can you end your phrase on bar 3? Which beat, right? So this is what Nathan was referring to, the exercises on the forums recently. It's like you can pace yourself by telling yourself, I'm going to play a definite amount of bar. You can even say, I'm going to play a definite amount of beats. How about I play for 7 beats and I rest for 4 beats? That's a total of 11
beats. Yeah.
My brain is still in French today. Like I was eating sushi. I want to travel to Japan. Japan. Got it. Sorry. So I know we've been going really fast with these things. We have to wrap this thing up right now. But all in all, the things we've talked about, the dynamics, the silences, the articulations, repeating, using repetition, using Motivic development, using now the more esoteric one, like the feel of your phrasing, your laid back, your phrase length, and being able to start your phrases anywhere within the bar and or within the form are all things. If you combine this, basically, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Once you're able to do all or any of this, you won't need us very much anymore.
So all of this said, these are a bunch of different elements that you can tackle all by yourself and with friends, of course, if you ever get a chance to play with people ever again. The jazz musician's challenge in all of this is making sure that is actually understanding that you are composing music in real time. That's what improv is. You're not making up new music, but you are trying to write music with your instrument in real time. It's pretty crazy. So wrapping your head around this, it's tough stuff, but it takes more than just notes and chords and rhythm, those big 3. So all sorts of different elements we can target. I want you to think about everything as a speech. Marc and I have been talking about this, the music as a language metaphor. Imagine you're up there public speaking. You have to think about your body language. We haven't even talked about that today.
No, yeah, we didn't cover it.
You have to think about your body language. You have to think about your the way that you're saying things. You have to take a breath every now and then, and present properly, so that people can digest the things that you're saying.
Absolutely.
You can think about things like I think there are examples of like different styles of improvising on record. Like I think we have a note here about Coltrane's
solo, where he was even preparing what he was doing. So there's these things that you can do to help yourself say, hey, I'm going to prepare a solo and do a bit of this here and a bit of that. So you're not always like without a safety net. You can always fall back on your feet.
My teacher in Ottawa, Tim Bednar, he when he recorded his album of Light and Shadows, he mapped out exactly where he wanted to place certain ideas, and he didn't like write them out specifically, but he'd say like, okay, in this segment of the music, I wanted to play this kind of line, or I want to be up in this range of the guitar at this moment in the form, for example. So it's semi-prepared, right? Semi-composed, semi-improvised.
So this is all the sets of tools that we've talked so far really are helping you adding contrast, variety, and helping you become a master jazz player and improviser. It applies to any other kinds of music. So we will wrap up this masterclass. Key takeaways, like English, or French music as a language. It is dangerous, quote unquote, to only focus on the contents of it. The aim is to tell a story with your music, and you need to master what you'll talk about, the songs and the scales and stuff, but then see if you can tell a story with all these other elements we've talked about. Don't be afraid to prepare your solos. This is what we've just talked about with Tim and with Coltrane. And on that note, unless, Nathan, you have anything else to add, we will conclude.
All of those other elements that we keep talking about, I wish we had a more dignified name for them as a group. They make the music amazing and interesting. The notes and chords and rhythm, they make the music as a foundation, but to make it really amazing and interesting, you have to have all those elements together. That's really all I got to say about it.
I think that's beautiful closing words. So on that note, thank you guys for watching the masterclass on music as a language on your jazzguitarlessons.net student portal, the Jazz Guitar Mastery Program. Once again, my name is Marc from jazzguitarlessons.net.
My name is Nathan from jazzguitarlessons.net.
We hope you have enjoyed this stream, and there's many more to come in your accounts, more masterclasses and more other content. Please keep us posted if you have any other questions about what we've talked about here in the comments below, and we will see you soon in the next video.
Thanks, and take care.
Thank you, guys.
Happy shedding.